Good morning. We are here this morning with Dr. Ross Greene, and he's going to be talking to us about solving problems collaboratively and proactively with our children and within our families. Welcome, Dr. Greene.
Thank you very much. It's nice of you to invite me to do this.
Okay. Before we get started, we're going to talk a little housekeeping. Dr. Greene is here to answer your questions live on air. So if you are joining us live on Tuesday morning, feel free to enter any questions and comments in the comment section. I'll be looking for those and we'll put them up and he'll speak with you directly. If you were watching a recording, he won't be able to do that, but you can dialogue with other people who are also watching the recording. That often happens. So thank you very much. And please put your questions in because that's what we're here for. Dr. Greene, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and feel free to put in plugs for your books. And I know you have a wonderful documentary, so we want to hear about that too.
Well, what I do is write books, but that's probably the least amount of my time. But the books that people may be familiar with are books like The Explosive Child and Raising Human Beings, if you're a parent, Lost at School and Lost and Found, if you're an educator. And in those books, I describe a model called collaborative and proactive solutions that helps caregivers focus on the problems that are causing kids concerning behaviors rather than on the concerning behaviors themselves. Because if all we're focused on is a kid's concerning behaviors, all we will be trying to do about those concerning behaviors is try to modify them. And that's usually through rewarding and punishing. And that's still very popular, and in fact, way too popular. Not only that, the kids who are most frequently on the receiving end of those rewards and punishments, whether it is in the form of a sticker chart, or a privilege, or a loss of privilege, or a timeout, or a detention, suspension, expulsion, hitting, getting pinned to the ground in a restraint, thrown into a locked or blocked padded room in a seclusion, arrested at school, those strategies are primarily being applied to the kids who are benefiting from them the least and aren't really needed by the kids who aren't really benefiting from them because they're never receiving them. What the research of the last 40 to 50 years has told us is that kids with concerning behaviors are lacking skills, not motivation.
Okay.
As a consequence of that, we should ask ourselves the question, then why have we been so busy applying motivational strategies to these kids when unmotivated is not what they are? They're lacking skills. And they exhibit their concerning behaviors, especially when there are expectations being placed upon them that they're having difficulty meeting. And in this model, we call those unmet expectations unsolved problems. Now, you might be wondering, or your listeners might be wondering, what kind of problems are we talking about here? Well, interestingly enough, it's often pretty mundane stuff that causes concerning behaviors in kids who are prone to concerning behaviors. Things like, at home, difficulty brushing teeth before going to bed at night, difficulty getting off the Xbox to come in for dinner, difficulty eating what mom or dad or whoever has made for dinner, difficulty turning off the technology at 9 p.m. to go to sleep at night. At school, I could go on forever, but at school it could be things like difficulty coming back into the classroom after recess, difficulty keeping hands to self in the hallway between classes, difficulty sitting next to Susie during circle time, difficulty completing the division problems on the worksheet in math. In kids who are not prone to concerning behaviors, those would cause a slight bump in the road, but because those kids have the skills to handle demands for flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation well, it doesn't cause a big issue. The kids who are lacking those skills, it causes a big issue. It causes concerning behavior. And what that tells us is that concerning behavior is just the signal, just the fever, just the means by which the kid is communicating. We've all heard behavior is communication. Here's what concerning behavior is communicating. There's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. So what I spend most of my time doing, whether I'm writing books or consulting to prisons or schools or inpatient psychiatry units or residential facilities or running Lives in the Balance, the nonprofit I founded, is helping caregivers understand a few things. Number one, concerning behavior should not be our focal point, and modifying that behavior should not be our focal point. And kids who exhibit concerning behaviors are lacking skills, not motivation, and that what we should be spending most of our time doing is helping kids solve the problems that are affecting their lives and causing their concerning behaviors. And that is about as fast an overview of this model, collaborative and proactive solutions, as I think I've ever given.
Now, I know no one has put it up, but I know that some of our parents are out there thinking, how do we tell the difference between a young person who's lacking skills and a young person who's lacking motivation? How many times does this behavior have to manifest before we know which we're dealing with?
Don't waste your time trying to figure out. Assume that it's lagging skills.
Okay. Okay.
You won't go wrong, right? Yeah. Worst case scenario, because of the process that is involved in solving problems, even on the very slight chance that the kid's behavior is intentional and purposeful, you're still going to get it addressed by thinking that it's about lagging skills. Don't spend a nanosecond trying to figure that out. Assume it's lagging skills. Start solving problems with your kid.
We should have had this conversation 20 years ago. You would have saved me a lot of time. Okay, let's jump right into it. Can you please explain CPS Connection?
CPS Connection is actually just a website that contains some resources on the CPS model. The model itself, Collaborative and Proactive Solutions, basically teaches caregivers how to solve problems with kids, but how to do it collaboratively and proactively. Let's talk about the collaboratively part first. This is something you're doing with the kid, not to the kid. This is adults don't have to think that they're the ones who have to come up with a solution. They've got a partner in solving problems, the kid. And yes, even the reluctant participants, and yes, even kids who are non-speaking can be engaged in the process of solving the problems that affect their lives. So the collaborative part is crucial. You've got a teammate, the kid. And as I always say, generally speaking, the kid's going to be delighted to help you out. The kid has probably been wondering for a very long time, how come we adults keep trying to make things better without the kid's involvement, without the kid's input, without the kid's ideas, without the kid's sign off? Why have we been doing it that way? I have no idea. The proactive piece is very crucial. One of the most common things I say to parents and educators and staff in facilities is, I'm going to get you out of the heat of the moment. You don't want to be in the heat of the moment. You don't want to be in the heat of the moment, whether you're focused on behavior or solving the problems that are causing the behavior. Heat of the moment's bad timing. Heat of the moment is crisis management. But here's the deal. Because those unsolved problems are predictable, and nobody ever believes that when I first say it. Many people are accustomed to saying to me, he always gets upset from out of the blue. That's always disproved. Kid is not getting upset from out of the blue. But we have to figure out what unsolved problems are causing the kid to get upset proactively. And this isn't the first time the kid has had difficulty brushing their teeth before going to bed at night. That's been 3 years, and we're still dealing with it in the heat of the moment. This isn't the first time the kids had difficulty coming back into the classroom after recess. That's been going on forever, and we're still dealing with it in the heat of the moment. So we use an instrument in the CPS model called the Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems to give us what we call the information that's been missing. What are this kid's lagging skills? What are this kid's unsolved problems? Once we figure out a kid's, by the way, that process takes 30 to 45 minutes. The instrument itself is free, just like everything else on the website of the nonprofit, Lives in the Balance, which is livesinthebalance.org. I'm sure you'll let your folks know about the website. All the resources on that website are free. But the first thing people should look for is the assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems in 30 to 45 minutes. It's going to give us the information that's been missing. We don't need to know what the kid's behavior is. We've known it for 5 years.
Okay.
We don't need to know what the kid's psychiatric diagnoses are. Those are just rough summaries of the kid's concerning behaviors, because psychiatric diagnoses in children are just long lists of concerning behaviors. We need to know this kid's lagging skills. We need to know this kid's unsolved problems. Once we figure that out, and by the way, on the website, there's a 35-minute video teaching people how to use the instrument and a video showing them how it's being used for real. Once we figure out the kid's lagging skills and unsolved problems, this is a very predictable kid. Intervention can be almost exclusively proactive.
That's wonderful. If I had only known. I want to remind our audience that you can ask Ross questions right now online. And I would, because if you've watched any of our other shows, you know that we have had guests who've referred to him. So we're very excited to have him here answering questions for you, just like he answered for some of our previous guests, or as our previous guest suggested that we seek his books and his documentary. Can you give us an example? Let's do a little play here. If you give us an example of a concerning behavior for someone who's a late tween, early teen, that some of a lot of our families may be dealing with, and how that we could work proactively, because we, as you say, the behavior is going to happen. We know it, even though we feel as if it comes out of the blue.
Well, it's the unsolved problem that's going to happen.
Okay.
The behavior is simply the response to the unsolved problem.
Okay.
So here's a list of behaviors, but that's not going to be our focal point. At the mild end, whining, pouting, sulking, withdrawing, crying. I'm not being exhaustive here. At the less mild end, screaming, swearing, hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running. Yes, I understand that some of those behaviors are more dangerous and more scary and more concerning than others. But here's what I want to know. No matter which behavior it is, what I want to know is what unsolved problem is setting that behavior in motion. That's what I want to know. Now I'm seeing that you're getting a little blurry. I'm going to turn my iPhone off of the internet and see if you become less blurry. I think it worked. Let's just increase my bandwidth a little bit.
Okay.
So let's say that the unsolved problem that is causing that concerning behavior is difficulty brushing teeth before going to bed at night.
Okay.
If we were to go the unilateral route, here's what we would say to the kid, and this is not the recommendation. If you do not brush your teeth before going to bed at night, actually, my solution to that problem is you can't play your Xbox until your teeth are brushed. That's not what you're doing in this model. That's concerning behavior about to happen.
Okay.
One of the things we do have caregivers do in this model is decide whether this expectation is even important, meaning compared to all the other expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting, because we do have to prioritize, can't work on everything at once. So it's entirely conceivable that the caregiver might decide, you know what, we're not even trying to solve that one right now because we got bigger fish to fry. But let's say we've decided to solve the problem collaboratively. 3 steps. Those 3 steps are called the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation step. The main ingredient of the empathy step is information gathering. Gathering information from the kid so as to understand what's making it hard for the kid to meet that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, your number one source of information in this model on what's making it hard for a kid to meet a particular expectation is the kid. I'm always telling caregivers, it's not your job to know, it's your job to know how to find out. The second step is the define adult concern step. This is where the adult or caregiver is entering their concern into consideration. Why do they think it's important that the kid meet that expectation?
Mm-hmm.
The third step is the invitation. This is where kid and caregiver are collaborating on a solution that addresses the concerns of both parties. Here's what that might sound like. And I use this example a lot because it happened. I was doing a similar podcast with a father, I guess it was a father's podcast, maybe 2 years ago, and he was telling me about his 3-year-old daughter who was, here's the unsolved problem, having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. Mm-hmm. Now, if you said to me, what was she doing to communicate that? What was her concerning behavior? I will tell you, I don't remember. Because once again, the behavior is the least important part. The problem we're trying to solve is the most important part. Now, he could have rewarded her for brushing her teeth and punished her for not. And I'm pretty sure that's what he had been doing. Mm-hmm. But here's the empathy step. First of all, he was telling me he thought he already knew what was making it hard for her to brush her teeth before going to bed at night. He told me he was sure it was the taste of the toothpaste. So 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste later, she was still having difficulty brushing her teeth before going to bed at night. So finally, he tells me he did the empathy step. Mm-hmm. And what did he find out? He found out that when he used the electric toothbrush on her teeth before she went to bed at night, it got water all over her face, and she didn't like that very much. Mm-hmm. What I said to him was, well, now there's a concern that 8 to 10 different flavors of toothpaste would never address. Mm-hmm. But it's also a concern that no reward or punishment would address. And that is a very important point. Mm-hmm. Rewards and punishments don't solve problems. Okay. They just give kids the incentive to meet our expectations. If you punish that kid for not brushing her teeth, number one, you're still getting water all over her face, and she still hates it. If you reward her for brushing her teeth, you're still getting water all over her face, and she still hates it. Mm-hmm. And you are losing credibility with this kid because you are not listening. You aren't even asking. Now, there are going to be caregivers who say, I don't ask, I don't listen. You just do what I say. Suit yourself, but you don't lose any authority. The kid is being held no less accountable by finding out from the kid what's making it hard for them to meet the expectation and by listening. Nothing is lost. Step number 2, what was his concern? He said to her, he's telling me this story, if you don't brush your teeth before going to bed at night, then the bacteria that's been on the food you've been eating all day will sit on your teeth all night. And that could cause cavities. And it kind of hurts to get cavities filled. And to tell you the truth, I'd rather not spend the money if I don't have to. Mm-hmm. The invitation begins with the words, I wonder if there's a way. Here's what it sounded like. I wonder if there's a way for us to make sure we don't get water all over your face when I'm brushing your teeth before you go to bed at night. That was the kid's concerns. And also make sure that you don't get cavities so that you don't have to deal with the pain that goes along with getting them filled, and so that I don't have to spend the money. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, you are then giving the kid the first crack at the solution by saying, you got any ideas? not because it's the kid's job to solve the problem. It's y'all's job to solve the problem. Y'all are partners. Y'all are teammates. If the kid doesn't have any ideas, I'm sure the adult will, but the kid usually does have ideas. She said, maybe we could wrap a towel around my face while you're brushing my teeth so that my face doesn't get wet and so that I don't get cavities. As I always ask, who won? Everybody. Who lost? Nobody. Whose authority was being undermined? Nobody's. That's how you solve problems collaboratively. And I don't really care what the problem is, whether it is unsafe sex or difficulty coming home in time for your 12 a.m. curfew or homework or showing up at school. It is the exact same 3 steps.
I like that. So what I just got from that is 1, prioritize expectations, which we have to do because sometimes we just double down on everything all at once and they're not all equally important.
Right?
Rewards and punishments do not solve the problem.
Correct.
And I liked how you said that all they do is incentivize the youth to meet your expectations. And if the youth is anything like I was when I was young, the moment they get a little bit of freedom, they no longer do whatever it is you incentivize them to do.
That's why radar detectors are so popular.
Yep, we dropped that. And then we have a question from Amy Flack. I'm going to put her up. Amy says, my granddaughter is so strong-willed at 2 years old, having difficulty on punishments instead of spanking her. Can you help?
Yeah, I wouldn't be punishing her. Punishment is for behavior. Punishment doesn't solve the problems that are causing those behaviors. And by the way, here's what's fascinating. Whenever I hear of a child who's very strong-willed, I also hear of adults who are very strong-willed.
Yes.
Who are on the other end of that interaction.
Yes.
So looks always, generally speaking, we have 2 strong-willed people. But here's what I'm willing to bet. There are expectations the 2-year-old is having difficulty meeting. And when adults insist that the kid meet those expectations, the kid balks, causing us to say that she's strong-willed. If the adults then kick in with their strong will in the form of punishment, whether it is spanking or some other punishment, it's still going to get ugly. Do I think you can engage 2-year-olds, especially if they're verbal, in the process of solving problems collaboratively? I do. So I'm not looking for another better, less aggressive punishment for the 2-year-old. I'm looking for what's getting in her way and how are we going to help her with that. And the last thing I would do to help a kid is hit them. But the last thing I would also do with a kid is punish them for an expectation they're having difficulty meeting.
Because there can be an underlying issue that you don't know about.
Even if there's not an underlying issue, like a learning disability or something, the kid, there is some reason that the kid is having difficulty meeting the expectation. And that reason, that information is golden. And you are not going to get that information by punishing a kid. You are actually going to make the kid say, they're not listening. By the way, the number 1 complaint I get from kids is that their caregivers don't listen. The number 1 complaint I get from caregivers is that their kids won't talk to them. Here we have a 2-year-old who is starting to talk, at the precipice of talking. Do we want to encourage that? Or do we want to punish the kid for expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting? I think we want to have that conversation. You lose no credibility by having the conversation. You gain information, you gain communication, you gain a relationship. I want to make clear to people, that doesn't mean you've dropped the expectation. That's a different story. That's prioritizing. But if there's an expectation that we've decided is a high priority and a kid is having difficulty meeting it, once again, the last thing I would do is punish the kid for not meeting it. I want to find out what's getting in the kid's way and partner with the kid on solving it.
We have a comment, a question from, I have actually a couple we're going to get to real quick, but you said that number one complaint from kids is that parents don't listen, and from parents or caregivers is that the youth don't speak. And I'm going to add a third that would come in a close second on both ends, is that I hear from teens in my life, and that's that the adults make too many assumptions about what drives them and why they're doing a particular thing or what they believe and know. So we really do need to listen.
I would call that 1B. It goes right along with 1A, right?
Yeah.
They're not listening, and they're assuming that they know.
Yeah.
One of the things I've learned as a parent, by the way, a lot of people think this is all really good in theory. Well, I got a 24 and a 21-year-old. This is kind of how I raised them, right? People find this hard to believe. And I don't want to use my kids as the example, but they were both reasonably well-behaved enough for me. Neither of them ever got a timeout. Neither of them ever got hit. We were too busy solving problems together. We were too busy figuring out what was getting in their way. So, yeah, you're not listening if you're busy assuming. You think you already know.
Yes.
What I was going to say is one of the things I learned as a parent, as well as a clinician, I don't already know.
Yeah.
One of the things people should be prepared for in the empathy step is when they find out that what they thought was making it hard for the kid to meet an expectation is not what was making it hard for the kid to meet the expectation.
Yes.
Plus, most of the time we've been talking with the kids about their behavior, not about the problems that are causing those behaviors. That's a very big shift all by itself.
And they don't make that leap. You have to help them make that leap by not focusing on the behavior. Now, for those who are wondering, I was a punish and reward parent. Did not, there was no corporal punishment in our house, but there was punish and reward. And I made assumptions. And when I was able to make the shift, our relationships changed, and their meeting expectations changed. It elevated. So it does work. And I did it without the books. I probably didn't do it as well as I could have if I had the books. I just knew that what I was doing wasn't working. And
I'd rather people do this poorly than reward and punish well.
Yep. So I have a couple of things we're going to put up before we are at the end of our time. We're going back to the example of the granddaughter. Lisa Fuller says, so you let the 2-year-old tire themselves out?
Nope. Trying to find out what's making it hard for the 2-year-old to meet an expectation is not the same thing as letting them tire themselves out. The kid is pitching a fit for some reason. So what I'm doing here is I'm pushing us upstream. Pitching a fit is downstream. It's what happens after a kid has had difficulty meeting a particular expectation. So now they're pitching a fit. Letting them tire themselves out is late. Pitching the fit is late. What's causing the kid to get upset in the first place? That's early. That's also predictable. So in other words, while I don't know if we can get rid of every pitching a fit the kid is going to exhibit, I know we can get rid of almost all of them by identifying unsolved problems proactively and by solving problems proactively. If your kid is pitching a fit, your kid is communicating to you something, and it's not, I must have my way. It's something's getting in my way.
We have, and Deborah Fish, she agrees with you because she says punishments in that case, back to the 2-year-old, only stifles the communication.
Bingo.
Because they're only, we agree with you, Deborah, they're only concentrating on one thing. We are at the end of our time. I'm going to give.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm going to ask you one more thing. If there's only one takeaway from this conversation that our audience needs to remember, what would that be? Or should that be?
Stop focusing on concerning behaviors. Start focusing on the problems that are causing those behaviors. Stop punishing. Start listening.
Stop punishing. Start listening. I love that. Thank you, Ross. We appreciate your time. I want to remind everybody you can be here tomorrow, same time, 10:30 Eastern time, live. We have coffee with Jen and Sharon. They're moms, and they're always talking about the things that we're thinking and talking to our friends about. So please return tomorrow morning, same place, 10:30 a.m. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Take care.